Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor gives you sports betting tips. I am your host, Professor Sides. That's my actual job title and last name, which is part of the reason why the mathematical model that I built to predict various sports outcomes is named Sideline. This college basketball episode covers every game scheduled to be played on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2022. Merry Christmas to everyone watching this here on Christmas Eve or on Christmas Day. If you're new here, check out the webpage on the banner. It's www.pickswiththeprofessor.com/new for some explanations, goals, full recommendations on wager scaling, and community rules. As always, remember there are no locks in gambling, so what Sideline provides are loves, lights, and leans. It is A, B, and C grades to indicate its confidence level with respect to scaling wagers. It's outlined in more detail on the webpage. I recommend playing the A grade plays at 1 unit, plays given out here at a half unit or an additional half unit. Also, there are picks on the website and Patreon's plays of the day and the Discord chat that I also recommend an extra half unit. And the compilation of these recommended results can be found both on BetStamp and in the Google Sheet. All those links are in the show description. The Google Sheet also takes the full set of projections and picks on every single game. And for early access to that, hit up the Patreon. Links in the crawler below and in the show description. It's also where you can access the Discord chat, which is the best place to get questions answered about these or other games. But as always, take what you like and leave the rest. Lastly, please understand that good and bad variance will occur. So as much as we'd like to see, we'll be profitable each and every day. It is an impossible reality for any gambler. Last time we saw you here on the games for December 23rd, a lot of them didn't break our way. And I think we kind of talked about it, Jake and I did. When you have a smaller slate, the random good or bad variance, it feels a lot bigger than it is. Hopefully you were on the right side of some of those things, but we saw in the Rutgers game, blowout game in the last minute, Rutgers dudes jacking up threes, getting the total barely over, costing us the under. And then we saw the Pepperdine game, guy passes up a layup at the very end, causing Jake's total to push. Now that number dropped, and I recommended that to people in the Discord at a lower number, so that at least one. But a push on a game like that where the guy had the layup and didn't take it, cost us. The other game, he hits a three. You flip-flop those, and you get two winners. And that's just that kind of, you never really know how that late game variance is going to go. And when you have a smaller slate, everything feels a little bit bigger than it really is. And so we kind of talked about it. And you saw the football game as well. We had Louisiana +7. They trailed that game for an entirety of 20 seconds and pushed on the +7. So the small slates can be kind of frustrating. A lot of frustrating results for us on the 23rd. Hopefully we'll do better here on the 25th. 5 games to cover. Going to be a little bit of a different look today. It's just me. And because we only have 5 games and a lot of plays that are a little bit more questionable right now, I'm going to talk about the numbers that I would much prefer to play them at. Dive a little bit deeper into the hood, give you a little bit more explanation. These are some of the types of things that people ask all the time in the Discord chat. So if you're not there with us already, get over there, because these are the types of things that we can dive into and help you learn a little bit more about why certain plays are recommended at different levels. So you're going to go a little bit deeper under the hood than usual, because again, fewer games, just me. But before we get to that, some reminders. Please hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Also, if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following. It's free, and if you turn on notifications, you won't miss any of the college basketball, MLB, or college football content that this channel provides. I've already mentioned the Patreon, but check it out if you haven't yet. Lots of great benefits to be found over there above and beyond what we do here. Membership starts at just $3 per month. www.patreon.com/pickswiththeprofessor. That's how you get there. But even if you're not there, we're still thrilled to have you here. We got 2 all-in courtesy of BetOnline. Sign up link in the show description. And current as of the time of this recording, it is midday on the 24th, Christmas Eve. Lots of time to dive into these 5 games. The A-plus play of the day, and this is usually where I would tell you how many A-grade plays we have and how this is the one that's the best of all. It's the only A-grade play. We tend to have around more like half the games get A grades early on in the season. That, of course, varies day by day and drifts more to about a third as the season goes along. 5 games today, only 1 A-grade play as of now. Again, I'll talk about the numbers that if that the model would give an A-grade to on the other ones later. But for now, the only one that meets that criteria is 5:30 p.m. Central, Utah State versus Washington State. We locked this in at Washington State +4 as an A-grade, and our Patreon members at the starter level or higher already got that information. We're already able to lock in +4. It's come down to 3.5. 3.5 is still an A-grade play. This is still an A-grade play down to +2, though. If I was looking at +2, I definitely would be thinking about a money line play there rather than taking 2 points, which doesn't mean as much. Getting 3.5, 4, though, add some value. You know, this could be a tight ball game. This might be the best game of the day. 2 pretty solid teams. Disappointing for them to not be in the title game. A little bit disappointing of a tournament here for Utah State now. 2 of their last 3 games having lost. Washington State couldn't get the job done against Hawaii late last night. So obviously 2 teams that had aspirations of being in the title game, but instead land here. Again, it should be a good one, though. 2 really solid teams. Sideline says this should be Utah State minus 0.7. So basically a pick 'em, maybe the slightest of leans, 51-49, 52-48 towards Utah State. So getting 3.5, I think, is a gift. We're seeing with all but one game today, 4 of the 5 numbers are basically just what Ken Palm makes the game. That's where they've hung them right now. And I think in 3 of the cases that's happened, I think that's a pretty good number. I think his numbers are pretty spot on. This is one where I have a disagreement with. I think this is a situation where Washington State is a lot closer in talent to Utah State than would be indicated. You also have to wonder about Utah State, again, 2 of the last 3 games having some disappointing outcomes, if that's going to carry over into this one. What's going on with them necessarily? They don't look quite like the team that they were earlier on. They looked good against Seattle in the first game of this tournament, but didn't look that great against SMU. Of course, we'll talk more about SMU later, but I'm going to grab the 3.5 here with Washington State. Again, already locked in at 4, would still play it as an A grade down to 2. I think that's the best investment of the day. And what should be an entertaining basketball game if you're able to get that one on your television set. Which takes us to the best B-side, the only B-side B grade play of the day. 3:30 p.m. Central, DePaul plus 16 at Creighton. Creighton, again, I mentioned it last time they played, now fully healthy. I don't really think that the difference between what we saw this last game, where they looked really good against Butler versus how they did before, I don't think that's all real. I think that's just a little bit of, underperformance, overperformance, that sort of thing. We always talk about observing games as from a distribution of possible outcomes, and that was just a good outcome in this last game, and they played well and tip your cap to them. You can't take that away from them by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they're quite that good now, fully healthy, versus how bad they looked before. I think the truth, as with most things in life, is somewhere in between there. They're still a very good team, absolutely, but I don't think now like all of their problems are solved. I think some of those issues they still had before are still there. They should have no problems with DePaul, but laying a number like 16, I'm just going to make them prove it again that they can really dominate another game before I'm really happy backing them laying such a big number. So I'm going to grab the 16 with DePaul. Sideline says this should be about 14.5. It's a B grade here at 16. It would need to be up to 18 before it gets up to an A grade. So unless there's just a lot of steam late chasing the favorite on Christmas Day for some whatever reason, I can't really see why it would happen. But if it does, 18s where it would be an A grade. It's just, you need a lot of points here because Creighton's a much better team. DePaul's not bad. Creighton's a really good team. But I still think 16 is a worthwhile investment, even if it's not an A grade, because of the fact that, Christmas Day, no idea what the crowd will be like, no idea where the players' heads will be. And so it's one of those things where if you just give me a bunch of points in the back pocket, I'll take my chances. And it might be a 30-point blowout, but it might be a lazy kind of game where it's just DePaul cruises to a nice little, Creighton cruises to a nice little 9-point victory, and we can cash the 16. So I think 16 makes sense to invest in, but again, not an A grade until it gets to 18. And to back Creighton, we would need it to be down to 13 would be the number where the model would give that an A grade. Again, Creighton, the better team at home, should absolutely win, but 16 is just too many points. We're going to grab the 16 with DePaul. And something you'll notice there that I think is interesting, just again, taking a little look under the hood, you'll notice that the numbers that we need an A grade on both sides are 13 and 18. And the midpoint of those is not what the model projects. The model projects 14.5. So it's actually closer to one than the other. Part of the reason is because the model's pegged Creighton pretty well for the most part of the season, but overestimated DePaul. So the model kind of needs a little bit more wiggle room from DePaul, given what it thinks because of that. So there's some mathematical reasoning behind the threshold for it wanting certain numbers for an A grade. So that's why, again, the model says 14.5. It would be okay at 13 with an A grade for Creighton, but it's not like you can't mirror that and go to 16 and say that's an A grade on DePaul. The model wants more with DePaul because of how much it's inaccurately overestimated them. And so it wants a whole lot extra than it wants on the difference on Creighton. And so that's why I always say, in general, especially for lower numbers, if you're 2 points away, that's a pretty solid play from what the model projects. As you get to bigger numbers, a lot of times 3, but you can see in this case, it's not always the case because it needs 3.5, about a 3.5 point differential from the projection to the number that we get on DePaul from 14.5 to 18 before it likes being an A grade play. So again, it's not an exact, 2 point differential, 3 point differential. That's a rough rule of thumb, that can be used, but there's reasons why things are or are not A grade plays in that range. And a lot of times it just has to do with how the teams performed this year, and the model kind of saying, yeah, we've done well. We can be a little more aggressive. We haven't done well with them. We're gonna pull back a little bit. And that's DePaul. It's overestimated DePaul a little bit, so it wants a full 18 before an A grade. But I still think 16 makes a lot of sense, knowing that we don't know where people's heads are going to be here on a Christmas Day game there in Creighton. Which takes us to the professor on the limb of the C grade plays. There's one that I'm going to recommend before we go the other two as total plays. 2:30 p.m. Central. Iona is playing Pepperdine, of course, still back out in Hawaii now. Iona's a 7-point favorite. Sideline says it should be about 7.5. It's a C grade play because it's a pretty decent price. In my opinion, for this one, if we could lay 6 with Iona, that would be an A grade. So it jumps pretty quickly from a C grade to an A grade here. 7 would be a C grade, 6.5 jumps it to a B, and then 6 gets it to an A. The reason why is because, kind of like I just talked about, the model's underestimated Iona, so it wants to be a little more aggressive with him, and it's overestimated Pepperdine, so that kind of swings that balance a little bit. So it only is about a 1.5 differential from what it projects to what we can get. So if this drops to 6, that would be an A grade investment on Iona. 6 and 7 and 8 are all pretty likely outcomes. So if it gets up to 8, I would not be on Iona whatsoever because, again, Iona's the better team. They should win the game, and you just never know how it's going to play out late with fouls. And so this is why I always talk about we're looking at long-term results. We're not looking at one game here, 5 games here, 10 games here, because even in a sample size of 10 games, you can have a lot of weird outcomes at the end of the games with foulings or guys just jacking up threes when it doesn't matter and swinging the outcome. We've all experienced a lot of that. And that's where we look at the totality of plays. You can see all those records get into the Google Sheet by grade type: A grade, B grade, C grade, all of them above 50%, but the A grades are the ones that shine, and that's why I recommend mostly backing them. And that's why the model here, though, it needs that 6 to get to an A, and at 7, it's only a C, because of the fact that 6 and 7 and 8, that's about where teams stop fouling and things get a little bit, who knows, it's harder to predict. So again, I think Iona -7 is not a bad play. And the reason I think that is because 7 being a fairly common ending point of fouls, I just think that's where I'm happy at 7 with a small investment, again, kind of a half unit investment. 7.5, though, would be a pass for me. So at 7, I think it makes a little bit of sense. Knowing we have that push protection on that number, again, I think 7 and 8 are the very possible likely outcomes. But again, if we can get to 6, that's where it becomes a really exciting play, because now 7 is a win, not a push, and 6 is a push instead of a loss. So keep your eye out on this number, where it's going. Shop around every half point or full point. We've seen a lot with totals lately. If you shop it around, that half point or full point might make a huge difference. Again, I'd love laying 6. I still think 7 makes sense. Again, they're the better team. I expect them to be ahead. What we've seen from them in the last couple of games, I expect them to be ahead late, and then you never really know with Iona. That's been kind of crazy. I just don't think Pepperdine has the horses to really hang in there, though. And so as long as Iona has a late lead, I'm just going to trust that they're going to foul enough to get us to 7, maybe 8, and that we can win, or at least, again, maybe worst case kind of push on that Iona -7. So I'm going to lay the 7 with Iona there. I just think they're a much better team and can get the job done. But again, it's not until it gets down to 6 that I really like it. With regards to Pepperdine, I want 10 before that becomes an A grade for the model. So unless you're getting double digits there, I don't think Pepperdine is a side I'd look to back. I know Iona is without one of their key starters. Didn't seem to matter against Seattle. And honestly, I don't think that Seattle and Pepperdine are drastically different. So Iona was able to weather the storm here in this last game. And I think they can do the same thing here on Christmas afternoon, which takes us to the total of the day. We're going to start with the early game here on Christmas afternoon, 12:30 p.m. Central. Seattle and George Washington. We're going to go over 145. The model says this should be 147. Seattle, a pretty average basketball team with regards to their talent, but they play a little bit fast. George Washington, an above average offense and just not a good defense. We saw it last night against Pepperdine. Just stretches of that game, just as Jake predicted. And we talked about where there were just some back and forth, up and down stretches with a lot of points. I don't really see how that's drastically different here with Seattle. Both these teams have played on aggregate more higher scoring games in this tournament. And again, I see that trend continuing here. I see it being more fun, exciting, early on basketball, that as long as we don't have a sleepy start, which shouldn't affect them because they've been out there playing these day games, everything's already weird anyway. So the time matters a little bit less here, I think, than a noon start on a Tuesday afternoon, in January or November or something like that, where they're back home. The thing's already a little bit different here. And so I don't think there's going to be a slow start necessarily. I think we can get over 145, 140 is average. And I think this is more well above average than just kind of above average with regards to the points. The other benefit, of course, this should be a tight contest. So we might have some late game fouls, get us extra points, and or overtime is also on the table. This is an interesting one where I'm not really interested in playing either side at the number it is right now. If you had to do anything, I probably would grab George Washington on the money line and just say, give me plus odds in a game that I don't really know what'll happen. Sideline says it should be Seattle -2, and the number actually is Seattle -2. I would need 4 with George Washington before that becomes an A grade to the model. And again, we always talk about, 2, 3, 4 are also possible landing spots for close games. 1 is possible, but 1's not as likely. It doesn't happen as often as 2, 3, and 4 do. So if he gets up to +4, you'd have some value there with George Washington. Seattle, I would need +2 with him. And you say that's a large difference between the model saying Seattle -2 and needing +2. It's a 4-point swing, but remember, we're crossing 0, and 0 is impossible, so there's no probability on 0. And because 1 is not that likely, crossing from -1 to +1 doesn't do you a whole lot of good either, because teams don't often win by 1 at the end of the game. The way the strategies play out, they tend to win more by 2 and 3. So we need Seattle +2 before that's a good investment. In my opinion, we need George Washington +4, but the model's been pretty accurate with George Washington and really overestimated Seattle. So again, if I was picking a side on this one, I probably would go George Washington money line, but it's just not a good enough odds to get me excited. I'd rather just play the over in the early game and just root for points. Again, the way I've seen these two teams play in this tournament, should be a lot of up and down basketball, lots of points, not a lot of great defense. Also, potentially with, as we saw with Seattle yesterday, potentially a lot of fouls. That could also help, because then we've stopped the clock and we're shooting free throws. So I think over 145 makes a lot of sense there in the total of the day, which is going to wrap us up with the must-see TV game of the day. And I kind of have this one here a little bit in jest. 7:30 p.m. Central, SMU at Hawaii. It's the must-see TV game because you're playing for a trophy. And playing for trophies are always fun. Hawaii having the chance to win their own tournament is something that I don't think anybody really saw coming. SMU coming into this tournament was 3-7 and rated by all accounts at average at best. And if you go to ESPN's predictive ratings, they have a quality rater, and other websites do. I believe Team Rankings has something similar. I know of a few other sites that have something like this, but if you just look at ESPN's quality rater for like interesting games, that they give each game a metric, and it has to do with how good the teams are and how close the game should be. It kind of takes the interaction of that. This is the worst game of the day. I just think that's hilarious, because this is the championship game for this tournament. But it kind of makes sense because, the Utah States, Washington States, and Ionas were the 3 teams that we thought were the best 3 teams coming in. It didn't make it here. SMU again, 3-7 coming in. They've played great. And this is where it gets really interesting, because in all of these games in this tournament, you've got 2 teams that have lost twice and 2 teams that have won twice. And now the 2 teams that have won twice, if you're backing one side or the other, you have to be betting against some team that's looked good. And so it's a little hard to say you should bet against SMU because they've looked so good, but also it's a little hard to bet against Hawaii because they've looked good too, right? And the same thing on the opposite with the 2-0-2 team. So there's always that like mind game you have. And you have that in the tournament as well, with its conference tournaments or March Madness, where all the teams that are left have been winning. And so you have to now predict someone's going to lose. And that sometimes is a little bit tougher to do because you've just seen them win, right? So you have to kind of get out of that, kind of just say, on the whole, how good are they? I still don't think this SMU team is that good. So I think Hawaii is probably a little bit better. Hawaii at home. Sideline says this should be Hawaii -5.4. So laying 5 with Hawaii, if I had to, I'd lay 5 with Hawaii. Again, with just late game fouls, I think Hawaii's probably up. But there's a lot of ways that Hawaii wins this game by 2, 3, or 4. So I don't really think it's the best investment. To wrap up here, your Christmas night, what I think the better investment is just going under 134. Sometimes it should be 132, 132 and a half. I expect a little bit slower of a start. Again, both these teams knowing that a trophy's on the line here. And that tends to have a situation where teams kind of feel each other out a little bit. Hawaii's played in some really low-scoring games. They've been the one team that's consistently in this tournament drug other teams down. We talk about Washington State, potentially one of the better offenses in this tournament in that late game here on the 23rd. And there were 113 points in that game. Now, SMU is going to play a little bit faster pace than Washington State, but I don't think they have the offense Washington State has. So I'm not predicting 113 points. I think there will be more than that. But, you go back to the game before that where Hawaii played Pepperdine. There were 146 points in that one. And Pepperdine plays at an insanely fast pace. And so the SMU's not even anywhere near that pace. I just think that this is a little bit too high of a total here, especially for a title game. Where do you on under 143? You can look first half under. I tend to just like playing the full game because you just never really know exactly how games are going to play out, when teams are going to get hot, when there's going to be runs of a lot of points, when there's going to be not runs of a lot of points. If you like first half betting, it's probably not the craziest play to go first half under, but I just like having the full 40 minutes there. Cross my fingers we don't have overtime. We do get a few extra points given to us on this total because the odds makers know that overtime is possible. So assuming we don't have overtime, then the under is a little bit more likely to hit there for the full game. So I'm going to stick the full game under 134, but again, first half, not a bad look. Again, the sides, Hawaii -5. We would need 3.5 before Hawaii becomes an A grade. We would need 7.5 before SMU becomes an A grade. So this one's actually pretty spot on in the middle. And this is a situation, again, as talked about looking under the hood. The model's been pretty accurate, both these teams on the whole, predicting their points, or their point differentials. A little bit underestimating Hawaii, a little bit more than SMU, but fairly close on the whole. And that's why, again, the model says about 5.5, and it's about a true 2 points. 2 points better than that at 3.5. It likes Hawaii as an A grade. 2 points worse than that. And you get to 7.5 and it likes SMU as an A grade. So this is kind of that standard 2-point swing that we talk about. If everything goes normal and it's a low number, you can generally look at the projections and say 2 points away makes for a really good investment. It just doesn't always hold based off of how well that team has done, how the models, how the algorithm is kind of seeing things. And again, the differences between what it needs for both teams to be an A grade gets a little bit bigger as the numbers get bigger because there's obviously a little bit more variance. And not a ton more. I want to make sure people hear this because we talk about, that DePaul Creighton game, DePaul winning by 10. It's not really likely. There's not a lot of weight on that. So the probability has to bunch up somewhere. It's just that when you get to bigger numbers, it does spread out a little bit. In general, when you get up to that 16, 20 point range, each number holds about 3% probability, whereas in the single digits, it's about 4%. So it's not a ton difference, but it's enough that the model just wants a little bit more wiggle room with those bigger numbers. And that probably makes sense with how you're probably thinking about the games anyway, how the algorithm is viewing it versus how we kind of like to think of it as well. With the bigger number, just want a little bit more of a cushion there, knowing that things get weirder at bigger numbers. Not by a ton, but by enough to, again, want us to have an extra half point or full point or something like that. So again, if this drops to 3.5 from 5, I'd be all over Hawaii. Really would love 3. 3 would be a great number to lay with Hawaii. Don't know if that's going to happen. Again, just putting that out there. We got a lot of time before this game happens. You could shop around, see what the number does. Or if it gets, again, up towards 7.5, even 7 would be something to be interesting with SMU, knowing that, again, that might be the point where fouls stop. But again, at 5, it's a pass for me on the side. I said I'm going to focus my efforts on the under -134. And that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Pitch the Professor. Again, a reminder to subscribe so you can ensure all the sports betting content we've run on this channel is dropped right into your feed. We'll be back. No games on December 26th, so we'll be back again for basketball on December 27th. We've got the bowl episode out right now to get you through the bowl game on the 26th, and then we'll have another bowl episode with Cousin Jared where we break down all the games through New Year's Eve, so don't forget to check out that. We've done really well with the bowl so far. Hopefully that can continue. But until we see you again, as always, best of luck, and remember, you can get your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.